It did not begin with the sound of bombs or the roar of tanks. It began with a single piece of paper, a decree that carried the weight of an empire. On the 1st of August, 2025, Washington struck with a weapon dressed in policy, a 50% tariff on shea butter, the lifeline of 160,000 women of Burkina Faso. No consultation, no negotiation, no warning. Just silence broken by thunder. For decades, this golden butter flowed from the red earth of Burkina Faso into jars and creams across Europe and America. It was more than trade. It was dignity. It was survival. And then, in one sudden move, the West declared it unworthy, bend or break. They said, but the soldier turned president, Ibrahim Traoré, chose neither. He stood before his nation and called it what it was, economic warfare. And so, a question was born: could one embargo spark not just resistance, but a new doctrine of African sovereignty? Could this crisis mark the birth of a continent no longer begging, but bargaining? Stay with us, because this isn't just another story. It's the future our ancestors dreamed of. Subscribe and walk with us for an Africa that never bows again. In the markets of Bobo Dioulasso, the drums of shea butter once rolled out with steady rhythm. Each barrel carried not just a product, but the weight of tradition, the hands of mothers, and the hopes of daughters. Then came August 1st, 2025. Overnight, that rhythm broke. A decree from Washington imposed a 50% tariff on Burkina Faso's most valuable natural export. What seemed like a line of legal jargon in the halls of America became devastation in the villages of Africa. Within hours, warehouses in Kaya shut their doors. Truck drivers who lived on the road now slept idle in their cabs, staring at goods that could not move. Women's cooperatives, once alive with chatter and song, stood silent under neem trees. The very butter they churned with their calloused hands, women's gold, was branded unworthy. For them, this was not policy. It was betrayal. In Missouri, Florida, and Texas, American buyers vanished from the phone lines. Some rerouted orders to Ghana and Benin. Others froze operations, unwilling to risk sanctions. The shea industry, built by more than 160,000 women across Burkina Faso, began to collapse under an invisible hammer. The pain was not only economic, it was personal. Salamata Konate, leader of a cooperative in Kaya, gathered her women together. She spoke with the weight of generations. They think we are only exporters, but we are mothers. We are fighters. Her words carried resolve, but behind her eyes was the fear of empty plates and hungry children. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the silence from Washington was deafening. No press conference, no apology, only vague statements about national interest and realignment. For the women in Bolsa, for the truck drivers in Dori, for the factory workers in Ouagadougou, those words meant nothing. What they felt was the sharp blade of dependency. The factories stopped procurement. Cooperative leaders stood with no instructions to give. And in the United States, something unexpected happened. The absence of real shea butter began to ripple through the beauty industry. In Denver, a mid-tier brand reformulated its creams with substitutes. Customers noticed. The texture was wrong. The scent was dull. Reviews cried foul. This isn't real shea. Something's missing. By the third week of August, boutique skincare stores from Brooklyn to Los Angeles displayed empty shelves. Clarissa Woodson, a shop owner in Chicago, stared at her empty stock and whispered, 3 months now. No Shea again. Her frustration mirrored that of thousands of small business owners. They cut staff, taped shipping boxes by hand, and prayed rent would not rise. For decades, the West had treated Africa as an endless supplier of raw goods, cheap and replaceable. But now, with one decree, America revealed its true hand. This was not commerce. This was control. It was, as President Ibrahim Traoré would call it, economic warfare dressed in policy. In Burkina Faso, the blow landed fast and deep. Haulage volumes dropped by 32% within 48 hours. Entire families who relied on this trade faced ruin. And yet, amidst despair, whispers of resistance began. Women who had cracked nuts for pennies now wondered aloud, why must we always sell it raw? Why must others profit more from our labor than we do? The world expected silence. Instead, the pain of this betrayal planted the seed of a question. Could this crisis be the spark of something greater? Could shea butter, dismissed as a commodity, become the banner of a nation's pride? The answer would not come from Washington. It would come from Ouagadougou, from the soldier who stood where others bent. In the heart of Ouagadougou, when others waited in silence, President Ibrahim Traoré rose with words that cut sharper than any blade. He did not disguise the truth. Standing before his trade council, he called the tariff what it truly was: economic warfare. His voice carried across ministries, villages, and markets like fire through dry grass. This was not the tone of a man begging for mercy. It was the stance of a captain who refused to bow. They tax our labor, our heritage, and the very hands that feed our women, he declared. In that moment, the soldier-turned statesman drew a line that no decree from Washington could erase. For decades, Burkina Faso had been told to accept its role at the bottom of the global chain, but Traoré's speech shattered that mold. Across the countryside, women listened to his words on transistor radios. In Bulsa, a Monatada sat cross-legged on the red earth, her fingers still thick with shea paste. She whispered to her neighbor, "At least he sees us. At least he speaks for us." That recognition, long denied by leaders groomed in Western capitals, was itself a revolution. Traoré did not weep for contracts lost. He did not beg for Western aid. Instead, he summoned agricultural unions to Ouagadougou the very next morning. They will not starve us. He told them, they will not break us by breaking trade. The phrase traveled farther than any shipment of butter ever had, from Nairobi to Mumbai, from Dubai to Dakar. His defiance made headlines. This was more than rhetoric. It was strategy. At midnight in the presidential palace, he reviewed roadmaps, ordered repairs on the Dori-Tema corridor, and prepared for a redirection that no economist had predicted. Where Washington sought to corner him, Traoré sought to carve a new path, and the comparison began to echo. In markets and on radios, people spoke his name alongside that of Thomas Sankara. Sankara had once said, "We must dare to invent the future." Now, decades later, Ibrahim Traoré stood as his living echo, daring not only to invent, but to defend that future with contracts and corridors, not just with speeches. Meanwhile, in America, cosmetic giants scrambled. Labs in Illinois and Georgia tried replacing Burkina Faso's Shea with Ghanaian stock and synthetic blends. But loyal customers saw through the disguise. Blogs accused them of losing their authenticity. Boutique founders confessed they were taping boxes by hand to cut costs. The economic war that Washington launched was beginning to backfire, and yet, President Ibrahim Traoré did not celebrate. He did not gloat. He moved with the calm of a strategist who understood that revenge is a poor substitute for sovereignty. He studied logistics, summoned his ministers, and reminded them of one guiding principle: Africa will no longer be managed. Africa will negotiate. That night, he traced his finger across a map. Once, every arrow pointed west to Europe, to America, to dependency. Slowly, he slid his hand eastward, until it stopped at the port of Guangzhou. His advisors watched in silence. They knew history was shifting under their feet. Here was the heart of defiance, not rage without direction, but anger turned into design. Traoré was not simply reacting. He was repositioning a nation, perhaps even a continent, where the West expected collapse. He prepared alignment. Where they demanded obedience, he envisioned sovereignty. The story of Burkina Faso was no longer just about butter. It was about backbone. It was about a people who, through one man's steady voice, found a reason to stand taller. On the morning of August 4th, at precisely 10:17, the counterpunch landed. While America turned its back, Beijing opened its doors. China's Ministry of Commerce issued import licenses to 128 Burkinabe companies. It was not charity. It was not debt disguised as kindness. It was trade clean, direct, and anchored in respect. A 5-year agreement worth $2.1 billion. Inside the National Palace, President Ibrahim Traoré stood before a wall-sized map. His finger traced the old routes westward, the ones that had kept Burkina Faso chained to dependency. Then he slid eastward, toward Guangzhou. He paused and declared, "This is no longer theory. This is our new axis." Ministers murmured in agreement. The pivot was real. What set this deal apart was not only its scale but its philosophy. For the first time, shea butter would not leave Burkina Faso raw and unfinished. Processing clauses, technology transfers, and reinvestment mandates were written into every line. Solar dryers, logistics grants, and factory training were not optional extras, they were obligations. The era of exporting identity for pennies was ending. In Shenzhen, Nanjing, and Tianjin, Chinese firms broke ground on new refineries built specifically to handle Burkina Shea. Meanwhile, in Ouagadougou, women once bent over shells with bare hands now scanned shipping manifests and learned Mandarin. Each ton exported now carried a stamp that read, "Women's Gold." It was more than branding. It was recognition. Across Africa, a phrase began to spread, shea diplomacy. On radio shows in Accra, on billboards in Lagos, the words appeared like a spark. For decades, African nations were told they lacked the sophistication to manage supply chains, but here, before the world's eyes, President Ibrahim Traoré was dismantling that myth. At the African Union, ministers debated whether cocoa, palm oil, and cashew could follow the shea model. In Dakar, fashion shows proudly displayed makeup lines labeled Sovereignty Shea. In Johannesburg, murals bloomed across walls, paintings of women lifting barrels of butter toward rising suns. A commodity had become a doctrine, a creed of independence. In America, the irony grew bitter. While small businesses shut their doors and customers complained of creams that felt greasy and false, Burkina Faso was not pleading. It was leading. The very tariff meant to starve the nation had birthed a framework that promised rebirth. Western analysts dismissed it as temporary. But in Shanghai, a biotech procurement director held up a jar of shea cream before investors and declared, "This is not aid. This is strategy." His words echoed across boardrooms from Jakarta to Seoul. Contracts soon followed long-term, bypassing European middlemen, signed directly with Burkina Faso. Inside the cooperatives, the transformation was even more profound. Women who once cracked nuts barefoot now wore gloves in newly built factories. Payments arrived within 72 hours, not months. Royalties flowed directly to cooperatives, making them shareholders in their own destiny. For the first time in history, the women of Burkina Faso were not invisible in global trade, they were its front line. The pivot was not only economic, it was cultural. School curriculums added modules on indigenous trade history. One assignment asked, "What does sovereignty smell like?" A 12-year-old girl answered, "It smells like the butter my grandmother makes." That was the heart of the doctrine, dignity restored. Identity reclaimed. From a decree meant to cripple, a revolution was born, not with slogans, not with protests, but with contracts and corridors. This was the Shea Doctrine, a lesson to Africa and the world that sovereignty is not given, it is negotiated, built, and defended. If you believe this is what Africa needed all along, say amen in the comments below. When the ink dried on the $2.1 billion agreement, the tremor spread far beyond Burkina Faso. What began as survival had become a spark, and that spark leapt across borders with the speed of rumor and the weight of prophecy. Suddenly, Africa's most overlooked crop was rewriting the language of sovereignty. In Ghana, cocoa farmers gathered in Accra to discuss a radical idea: why keep selling beans raw when they could own the chocolate factories? In Senegal, agricultural unions began studying cashew refining. Inspired by the Burkinabe pivot, in Nigeria, policymakers quietly debated how palm oil could be reimagined as an engine of independence rather than a chain of dependence. Across the continent, leaders were asking, if Burkina Faso could do this with butter, what could we do with gold? With coffee? With cotton? The phrase Shea Doctrine entered lecture halls from Nairobi to Cape Town. Business schools dissected President Ibrahim Traoré's moves as case studies in vertical integration and value chain control. Students in Addis Ababa debated his words: "We are no longer your reserves. We are your rivals." It was not just policy, it was a declaration of generational change. And in the diaspora, especially among African Americans over 60 who had lived through decades of civil rights battles, the news struck a deeper chord. They remembered their grandmothers using shea butter for healing, for hair, for pride. To them, this was not just an economic story, it was ancestral continuity, a product once dismissed as primitive now standing as a symbol of Pan Africanism fulfilled. Meanwhile, Western corporations scrambled to adjust. The Wall Street Journal, rarely sympathetic to African movements, ran a headline: "From Shea to Strategy, Africa's New Power Broker." At the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, delegates from 15 nations voted to classify shea as a strategic soft commodity. For once, Africa was setting the agenda, not receiving it. Inside Burkina Pulse, local media described the transformation with reverence. This is not charity, this is dignity. Reporters highlighted how royalties were now guaranteed for cooperatives, making women not just workers but stakeholders. The policy resonated across villages, where grandmothers taught granddaughters that cracking nuts was no longer labor for pennies. But the foundation of sovereignty in American cities, the absence of authentic shea, continued to sting. Beauty brands that once dictated global trends now faced revolt from their own customers. Bloggers exposed reformulated products. Consumers demanded transparency. The narrative had flipped. The authenticity lay not in New York or Paris, but in Ouagadougou, and still, President Ibrahim Traoré moved without spectacle. No parades. No fireworks. At midnight sessions, he reviewed refinery timelines and infrastructure maps. His focus was relentless to ensure that this pivot was not a one-time miracle, but a framework others could follow. He told his ministers, "When we control the first mile and the last word, we control the story." That story began to echo far beyond Africa. In Seoul, K-beauty startups signed direct contracts with Burkina Faso. In Tokyo, luxury brands bypassed European brokers to secure their own supply. In Jakarta, trade officials requested joint ventures on palm derivatives. The Shea Doctrine was no longer just African news. It was global news. For the first time in modern history, a landlocked African nation had turned a raw material into leverage, into respect, into strategy. The tremor was not just in cosmetics, it was in politics, in pride, in the possibility that Africa could rewrite its destiny not with slogans but with signatures. And yet, beneath the headlines and the statistics, the deepest change was spiritual. Murals painted in Johannesburg showed women raising barrels of shea like torches toward the sun. Poems recited in Dar es Salaam compared cracked shells to scars now healed. Across a continent once silenced, the chorus grew louder. Africa will no longer ask, Africa will declare. The pivot had become a pattern. The doctrine had become a dream, and that dream was no longer confined to Burkina Faso. It was continental. It was inevitable. In Ouagadougou, the midnight oil still burned. President Ibrahim Traoré sat with his ministers, red pen in hand, crossing out clauses, demanding revisions, refusing loopholes. For him, sovereignty was not a slogan. It was paperwork, schedules, contracts written with precision. Yet outside the palace walls, the impact was already visible. Women in Ouagadougou danced at dawn, lifting their baskets not as beggars in a global market, but as shareholders in a national rebirth. This was more than survival. It was identity reclaimed. For decades, Africa had been told to wait for aid, wait for investment, wait for approval. Now, under the steady voice of President Ibrahim Traoré, the waiting ended. He declared openly, "We are no longer your reserves. We are your rivals." That single sentence traveled across the continent like prophecy. In Addis Ababa, African Union delegates repeated his words with pride. In Accra, student activists painted them across campus walls. In Lagos, radio hosts debated what it would mean if cocoa could be reimagined in the same way Shea had been. And in Harlem, Chicago, and Atlanta, the African diaspora elders who had marched for civil rights, who had seen history deny them dignity, listened and felt something stir. It was as if a promise long delayed was finally being spoken out loud. The doctrine that rose from shea butter was not just about trade. It was about African sovereignty. It was about Pan Africanism made tangible, no longer a dream in exile, but a policy written in ink. Traoré, often called the heir to Thomas Sankara, had not only honored the past, he was inventing the future. One shipment at a time. The echoes of Sankara's call, "We must dare to invent the future," were alive in every refinery, every cooperative, every woman who signed her first export invoice. And yet, this movement was not without its costs. More than 400 Burkinabe soldiers had fallen in recent months, defending villages from extremists. Their blood was the currency of sovereignty, but for every loss, there was also resilience. Families rebuilt, roads reopened, contracts held firm. It was proof that freedom was never free, and yet always worth the price. As Captain Ibrahim, latest news spread across Africa news networks. A narrative shifted. Burkina Faso, once dismissed as landlocked and powerless, now stood as a model. Journalists called it the Burkina Pulse, the heartbeat of a continent learning to stand. Investors from Asia signed contracts. Young entrepreneurs in Nairobi and Kinshasa launched startups around indigenous resources. Universities introduced courses on the Shea Doctrine as a blueprint for the next century. In this rising chorus, Pan Africanism was no longer only a philosophy. It was logistics, exports, refineries, royalties. It was women in factories saying, "We don't chase contracts anymore. They come to us." It was presidents declaring that African hands would no longer be invisible in the global economy. Burkina Faso latest news was no longer tragedy or dependency. It was pride. It was vision. And at the center of it all stood President Ibrahim Traoré Traoré, the soldier who had become the strategist, the man who had turned butter into a battleground and won. For the diaspora watching across oceans, it was a moment of affirmation, the dream of unity, the hope of Pan-Africanism. The cry for justice all found their echo in a small West African nation that refused to bow. And so the question remains, if one nation could rewrite its story with Shea, what else can Africa reclaim? What gold? What oil? What grain will next become a flag of sovereignty? The doctrine is no longer theory. It is practice. It is alive. From the silence of a decree to the roar of a continent, the story of Burkina Faso under President Ibrahim Traoré is more than a trade dispute. It is a parable of sovereignty. What began as a 50% tariff meant to suffocate an industry has instead birthed a doctrine that redefines what it means to be African in the 21st century. Traoré did not surrender to despair. He did not beg the West for permission. He pivoted with dignity. And in doing so, he turned a raw commodity into a sovereign symbol. Today, shea butter is not only an ingredient in creams and lotions, it is a flag of defiance, a song of resilience, a testament that African sovereignty is not theoretical, it is tangible. Négociable, enforceable. This doctrine echoes far beyond Ouagadougou, from Accra to Lagos, from Johannesburg to Harlem. The words of President Ibrahim Traoré stir old wounds and plant new seeds. His defiance reminds us of Sankara, his strategy inspires a generation, and his vision points to a future where Pan Africanism is not only an idea but an infrastructure. The question now is not whether Burkina Faso can stand. The question is, will the rest of Africa rise? Will cocoa follow the path of shea? Will cashew, gold, and cotton become more than exports, become emblems of independence? Will the diaspora, long exiled from the table of power, now join their voices in shaping a continent that negotiates as an equal? If you believe this is what Africa needed all along, say amen in the comments below. Because this story is not just about Burkina Faso. It is about all of us. It is about ancestors who prayed for a day when their children would no longer beg. It is about a future where our labor is valued, our dignity is honored, and our sovereignty is unshakable. If this story moved something in your chest, don't scroll past. Like, share, speak, subscribe, because they hid our history long enough. Let's speak our future out loud. Thank you for being here. We'll see you in the next story, the kind they still don't want you to hear. New Africa. Africa rise. Africa can do it. It's time for Africa.